Hey, what's up? This is Andrew Bora coming at you live, Bora Fitness, Glencoe, Illinois. Today, I'm going to do a short video tutorial on the kettlebell clean. The clean is very similar to the swing. So a swing movement, you're using your hips, your core to propel the bell upward. So it's great strength in the posterior, hamstrings, glutes, back, shoulders. The clean is very similar in the sense we're getting that same initial hip pop and then we're landing with the bell on our wrist. So from the lateral view, it's going to look like this. Now that might look simple enough, but there's several moving parts. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the negative space between the kettlebell and your hips. So in order to keep the resistance, keep our glutes or hamstrings moving the weight in our lower back, we want to avoid catching the bell. I'm going to take a stand here on the platform so you can see my full body. We want to avoid catching the bell too low to the ground. We want to keep the weight close to our hips in order for our hips to be our prime mover. So again, the full movement is going to look like this. So again, we want to avoid catching low down here. I just did that one time. I can already kind of feel my lower back twinge a little bit. So we want to avoid our lower back doing most of the work. Naturally, it will help to some degree or another, but we want our glutes doing as much work as possible. So again, we're here. So that's the catch position at the bottom. That's the first thing. The second thing we're going to talk about is the landing. So we want to avoid slamming on our wrist really hard. So if you watch me again, watch what my knees are doing here as I land at the wrist. So notice how my knees softly bend. That's one thing that's going to help kind of absorb some of this kinetic energy as it lands in your wrist. Versus, I'll face this way, versus doing this. And just kind of slamming into your wrist and shoulder. So again, the other thing I'm doing to help with that is my breathing pattern. So I'm exhaling at a couple different points. I'm exhaling at the very bottom of the movement, and I'm exhaling again as I land. So as I land, I bend the knees a little bit, I exhale, and that softens that landing a little bit. So we have the catch position at the bottom, we have the landing. The third and final thing that we're going to talk about today is the amount of negative space. So as you're dropping, so as you're coming from here downward, think about the negative space between your forearm and your abdomen. So we're allowing the arm to come completely straight just about, and the forearm just about to make contact with the abdomen before we push the hips back. So the bell's falling, it gets to about this position here, about waist height or so. That's when we start to push the hips back versus that. So let me do it with the bell so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to wait for my forearm to either make contact or maybe just come within an inch or two of my abdomen, and then I'm going to push my booty back a little bit at the bottom. Versus, again, that's kind of catching low, and we're not allowing the forearm to make contact with the abdomen. So I'll switch hands, I'll do a few more so you can see from this angle. And I actually lied just now. That wasn't the final thing. So far we talked about the catch position at the bottom. we've talked about landing smoothly, and we've talked about negative space. The fourth thing I want to talk about is our hand insertion, which is a very important detail that I would feel remiss if I left out. The hand insertion is where the handle sits in a palm. I'm going to move a little closer to the camera. So our hand insertion is almost like we want to slide our hand through the window of the bell to catch it here versus catching it up here. A lot more tension on our wrist versus here versus here. So that's a pretty egregious example. But even if you're here, there's still going to be a lot of pressure on the wrist. So we want to almost have it so that it's sitting at this kind of downward trajectory, this kind of diagonal angle. So I'm going to do it again so you can see, boom. And it's hard to see at full speed, but what I'm doing is I'm sliding my hand through that window, boom. So that takes a little training, a little practice. It's not something you can quite expect to do it, 10 or 20 times, you just have it down. This might take several attempts. I always say you got to do it about 500, 600 times, and then you'll sort of know what you're doing. So that's 4 things. We have our catch position at the bottom. We want to keep it close to the hips. We have our land, and we want to land as smooth as possible without slamming the bell on our wrist and shoulder. We have the negative space between our forearm and our body, keeping it close to the body as we come down. We're not pushing it super far away. We're keeping it tight to the body, pushing the butt back at the bottom, coming up. And then we have our hand insertion as we land. We're sliding our hand through that window. So there's 4 things that will, if you focus on each one of these 4 criteria, will help with the kettlebell clean. This is Andrew Bora signing off.